Yeah.
I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with this hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gonna teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Welcome to episode 466. It's Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is back out on assignment. He had a big weekend. He might have did it just a little too much. Kind of still doing a little bit of that stepping and things of that nature. With the, this is a big weekend for us in terms of Founders Day, and we'll give a little shout out for that. 117 years, Charles.
117 years, oldest and the coldest, yes indeed.
All day long. Welcome to the episode 466 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast, the show that's covering it, sporting HBCU dash or all things HBCU sports for institutions large and small, from the NAIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics, to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We're filming from our home studios in Center Signal Live, KSOH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, multi-Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper in a beautiful home at Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. As you saw, 117 years, producer putting that up there, showing us some love. Big day yesterday. It was cold. It got cold appropriately in the room in the world. Boy, I tell you.
All cute.
Brothers and smokes blazing everywhere. You see your boy just trying to show out a little bit,
That's pretty dope sweater. I like that.
Appreciate it. I'm just saying, sometimes you got to show out a little bit. It comes your way. Just making it work.
No doubt.
So for all those brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, happy belated Founders Day. Oldest and the coldest, as Charles said. How you doing today, Charles? With that being said, what did you do for Founders Day?
What did I do? It's part of my finals week, so I was doing scholarships. I was in the midst of scholarship for my Founders Day, so yeah.
I was doing academic scholarship myself, but I did get out and make sure I got a little brotherhood smoke. I didn't call you for that because I knew you were doing your scholarship. I didn't want to be the one that pushed you in the wrong direction, as they said. Leaning on the shield in the wrong way. Talking, come on, man, come on.
I will get a chance to celebrate Founders Day once again, but this week, woo, it's all about scholarship. Love for all mankind.
Man, that's pretty cool. Everybody, they don't call you smart guys for nothing. But that means let's stand and show the MEAC some love in terms of the offensive and defensive players of the year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, let's take a look at MEAC announced the 2023 offensive and defensive players of the year as North Carolina Central's Davis Richard and Howard defensive back Kenny Gallup were named 2023 offensive and defensive players of the year. The honorees were announced during the 65th annual National Football Foundation Hall of Fame press conference, which was aired live on ESPN Plus. So, and this is a statement from Commissioner Sonia Stills. Congratulations to both Davis and Kenny on being named the offensive and defensive player of the year. These talented student athletes have earned every accolade they receive and are fine representatives of North Carolina Central University and Howard University and the MEAC Nation. I'm proud to bestow the Player of the Year honors to Davis and Kenny for their on-field success. So congratulations to Davis Richard and Kenny Gallup for their offensive and defensive prowess this past season.
You know, I went on Brian and AD's show, Sports Lab, on Sunday night. Had my little FAMU gear on, gave them congratulations, did it the right way. It was kind of crazy because the FAMU sweatshirt I had on, I really brought before I just dug in and got into HBCU sports, like the shirt. And that was at the time where I just was supporting HBCUs because everybody else was wearing like, you know, Carolina, Michigan, or Texas or whatever. And I was like, I like the colors in the framework, and I wanted to represent HBCU. So when I didn't have wear a Prairie View and I wanted to wear a colored type framework, I got something. I saw that, picked it out. It was on sale, good price. Foot Locker at that time when they were doing all that, and grabbed it. So I pulled it out. I said, this would be perfect for the show. Since things didn't go well for Prairie View and Panthers this week, or at least well enough to post up the trophy. But I wanted to tease Roy a little bit and bury the lead before I gave him official congratulations to the Rattlers, his Rattlers, and many others Rattlers for getting it done as they defeated Prairie 35-14. We're going to bury that a little bit because we'll get a chance, since we weren't on Sunday, we'll break down that game in the second segment as we come to it. But that means that it's all settled now. In Atlanta, in 2 weeks, essentially, 2 weeks, we have a champion will rise in the ATL. That is the Cricket Celebration Bowl. We will have the Howard Bison out of the MEAC. That's Saturday, December 16th, 11 a.m. on ABC ESPN. Plus, you have the Howard Bison that come in at 6-5, 4-1, winning the MEAC. And you have Florida A&M Rattlers coming in with a 11-1 record. Very impressive. 8-0 in conference play. Should be an interesting matchup. A lot of people can go back, you know, just less than 5 years ago, these two teams were playing out of the same conference, trying to represent the MEAC. And so that brings some different pageantry to it in terms of what that looks like. So it should be a matchup. We'll get a chance over the next couple of weeks to really get into it. But I at least wanted to provide the official announcement that it's all down to this one game now. We have one more game in terms of MEAC Celebration Bowl. We do have a second HBCU game at the Division II level that features a representative out of the SIAC and representative out of CIAA. We're getting that a little more as well. But Charles, what are your thoughts, initial thoughts, early, way too early thoughts on the Cricket Celebration Bowl matchup between Howard and the Rattlers?
I think it's going to be an excellent matchup. When you take a look at Howard and their running game, which, you know, stands out for me when you're talking about players like Eden James going up against this FAMU defense. And, you know, the FAMU defense, they remind me so much of the past 2 years, especially with Jackson State's defense. And I thought, you know, the SWAC has the edge going into the Celebration Bowl the past 2 years. But the MEAC has proven themselves that they come in again with that chip on their shoulder. They come in with that running game. They come in with a surprise every now and then, whether it be some sort of gadget play of some sort. And, you know, they've taken it to the SWAC, quite honestly, over the past few years. So, you know, I think some people, you know, question Howard's worthiness of being in the celebration game. And to those people, I say, you have not seen this Howard football team. It is a good football team, and I'm looking forward to a great game.
Yeah, that's a great point. A great point. I think they crashed the party in terms of, for so long, it looked like it was going to be North Carolina Central Eagles. Yeah. Returning to it and seeing if they could defend against the Rattlers, both teams sitting in the top 10. But Howard was the one that got it done at home and put up 50 points. So it wasn't like they just got by a field goal, you know, got a late fumble. They dominated that matchup in that game. So certainly in terms of you look at that, they rightfully should be there. And some of it is our perception of Howard athletics. You know, we joke around in terms of the wine and cheese crowd and things of that nature, but you know, we don't, you know, take a look at Howard athletics in that regard, especially Howard football lately. So, but I'm telling everybody who'll listen that this is going to be a close one. This is going to be a good game. Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how this all turns out, physicality in the matchup, the pageantry between these two teams. You know, FAMU has had a control of the Atlanta market going back, obviously, when they used to play the Atlanta Classic against Tennessee State, played a couple of times against Southern in those particular matchups. So when you think about them, that's going to be fascinating to see how they come out and represent, looking for a championship, a brand that is one of the top brands in HBCU sports with all a rich history. So the pageantry will be there certainly from their side. And then you look at Howard, that has their own rich history, has its own, certainly, as they call themselves, the Mecca, but all the different celebrities attached with Howard. It's going to be interesting to see who comes out to get some of that spotlight and be in the house for this big-time matchup. In a lot of ways, will probably crown a Black college national champion one way or the other, particularly as what we refer to the major division. We'll see what that looks like for the mid-majors. Benedict has all but wrapped that up. We do have a game, so we won't release the final framework of that until a little later. We get closer to it. With that being said, I did want to have this, since we're talking about the history of Black college football. You got the 2024 Black College Football Hall of Fame class finalists was released. So I certainly want to get your thoughts on this, Charles. The list includes 23 players and 5 coaches. Quote, would like to congratulate the class of 2024 finalists, said Doug Williams, Super Bowl 22 MVP, chairman and co-founder of the Hall of Fame. Quote, each of these men represents the absolute best of Black college football. The finalists were selected from a field of over 200 nominees by a 10-member selection committee composed of prominent journalists, commentators, historians, former NFL general managers, and football executives. Quote, thank you for the selection committee for the dedication and hard work in selecting the year's finalists, and the committee chairman, Charlie Neal. Quote, the job of the selection committee is not easy, but the passion for preserving the history of Black college football shows in this year's group of finalists. No doubt about that. The class of 2024 will be announced on December 14th, 2023. They will be recognized for the first time at the All-State HBCU Legacy Bowl in New Orleans on February 24th, and honored during the 15th Annual Black and College Football Hall of Fame induction ceremony on Saturday, June 8th, 2024 in Atlanta, Georgia. For more information, you can go to www.blackcollegefootballhof.org. Now listen to these names. This is where I want to see what had hit your eyes. Julius Adams, defensive end, Texas Southern University, 1967 to 1970. Joe 747 Adams, quarterback, Tennessee State, 1977 to 1980. George Atkinson, safety, Morris Brown, 1965 to 1968. Antoine Bethea, defensive back, Howard University, 2002 to 2005. Dwayne Board, defensive end, North Carolina A&T State University, 1975 to 1978. Larry Brooks, defensive tackle, Virginia State University, 1969-1972. Vince Buck, defensive back, Central State University, 1986 to 1989. Wayman Bryan, linebacker, Tennessee State, 1970 to 1973. Kevin Dent, safety at Jackson State University, 1985 to 1988. Henry Dyer, running back, Grambling State University, 1963 to 1965. Vernon Holland, offensive lineman, Tennessee State University, 1967 to 1970. Richard Huntley, running back for Winston-Salem State, 1992 to 1995. Ezra Johnson, defensive lineman, Morris Brown University, 1973 to 1976. Rashawn Mathis, defensive back, Bethune-Cookman University, 1999 to 2002. Jacquay Nutley, wide receiver, Florida A&M University, 1997 to 2000. Lamar Parrish, running back from Lincoln University, 1966 to 1969. Tyrone Poole, defensive back, Fort Valley State University, 1991 to 1994. Anthony Pleasant, defensive end of Tennessee State University, 1987 to 1990. Jake Reed, wide receiver of Grambling State University, 1987 to 1990. Eddie Robinson Jr., linebacker, Alabama State University, 1988 to 1991. Dominique Rogers Cromartie, defensive back, Tennessee State University, 2004 to 2007. John Theory, defensive end, Alcorn State University, 1991 to 1994. Jay Skywalker, quarterback at Howard University, 1991 to 1994 as well. Coaching finalists, 5 coaches, we said, right? Rod Broadway, head coach, football coach of North Carolina Central University, North Carolina A&T, and Grambling State University, 2003 to 2017. Rudy Hubbard, head football coach of Florida A&M University, 1974 to 1985. Eddie Hurt, head football coach at Morgan State University from 1929 to 1959. Fred Poplong, head football coach at Wiley College, 1921 to 1965. Played Ben L. Cavil Sr., HBCU football. Played under Fred Poplong as he dominated Wiley College in the first decade of SWAC, as he had many SWAC championships during that year and several HBCU national championships. Doug Porter, head football coach, Mississippi Valley State University, 1961 to 1965. Also attended Howard University from 1974 to 1985, as well as Fort Valley State University from 1987 to 1996. Charles, take it away. Where do you want to start? As I just saw you really having a big smile there as you were recalling names, reading updates, seeing some pictures, seeing some play in front of your eyes, I see. And other ones that you remember reading about, and some of them you got a glimpse, whether it was college and even some of them most recently at the professional level in the NFL.
Yeah.
Know your thoughts.
Well, obviously, I grew up in Jackson, in the heart of SWAC country, but there's a sizable population of Tennessee State alums in Jackson. So a lot of the names from Tennessee State, when you talk about 747 Adams, when you talk about Wayman Bryant, I've grown up, listening to those names, especially from my neighbors who are huge Tennessee State alums, Anthony Pleasant, all those guys. So it's going to be very interesting when you talk about trying to cull down this list. For a lot of us playing football in Jackson, we grew up on those Jackson State teams of the 1980s, and Kevin Dent was a center point of some great defenses at Jackson State. 1987 comes to mind. So definitely going to send a shout out to my guy, Kevin Dent, in regards to his nomination. But just some other names. I mean, I grew up listening to people talk about Henry Dyer running the football at Grambling. Of course, growing up, we watched Jake Reed when he came to town to take on those great Jackson State defenses. I was in school when John Theory was at Alcorn and Steve McNair was at Alcorn. And you talk about those Alcorn teams of the early 90s. Of course, we spent time with Jay Skywalker this past weekend. And his accomplishments at Howard. So this is a great group of guys. And I can't even start with the coaches. I mean, the coaches, this is definitely a who's who list of HBCU coaches when you're talking about Rod Broadway, Rudy Hubbard, Eddie Hurt, Pop Long, Doug Porter. My dad was in school with Doug Porter, Mississippi Valley State in the early 60s. So it brings up a lot of great memories. And this is going to be a tough group to kind of cull the finalists down even more to this year's Hall of Fame class.
That's good stuff. Good stuff. Way to put a button on it. Yeah, John Theory. I remember him and Ben Cavil as they would have in the off season. They would go over to Ben Cavil's father's house and some of those barbecues. I just couldn't imagine that giant of a man. God, oh Lord.
Yeah.
I say what?
Yeah. Theory was a dude.
He was a dude. All of country strong too.
Yeah.
With that being said, last thing I will say, because I think it's important before we go to this first break, Black College Football Hall of Fame was founded in 2009 by African-American pioneers quarterback James Harris and Doug Williams to preserve the history and honor the greatest football players, coaches, and contributors from historical Black college and universities, HBCUs. There have been over 100 inductees since inception, including Mel Blunt, James Harris, Willie Lanier, Art Shell, and Doug Williams, who serve as trustees. The Black College Hall of Fame, BCF-HOF, soon will have a permanent home at the Pro Football Hall of Fame to tell the story of historically Black college universities, HBCU. So want to do that as we take our first break. We'll come back on the other side and get into some more dialogue as we continue to push forward. So we got a couple of big weeks left as we close out the football season, get into basketball. Some big victories out there. Shout out to Pine Bluff getting it done just most recently, as well as some other HBCUs getting it done on the hardwood. With that, stick with us. Be right back after this break.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
You see, Head & Shoulders has scalp shield technology, protects against flakes even between washes. It's never not working.
Kind of like us. We're never not working. Number 15?
That's my rub.
Ooh, nice.
Never not working.
Never, ever, never, ever not working.
Welcome everybody to Juneau, Alaska.
I don't like this one.
Me neither.
Let's get out of here.
Dandruff protection that's never not working. Head & Shoulders scalp shield technology.
T. Madden & Associates is a sophisticated and experienced law firm located in your neighborhood. We're turning injury to cash.
T. Madden and Associates obtained almost $2 million for my injury. They turned my injury to cash.
Now, we can't guarantee how much your injury is worth, but we've recovered millions for our clients.
Call T. Madden & Associates at 833-PAID-123. That's 833-PAID-123.
Compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Bill inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Charles Bishop. As we get into it, I want to talk a little bit about the game that took place Saturday before we get into our mid-major poll rankings. It's frozen this week, so we will do the honor just to remind you who our top 7 HBCU programs are this year as we get into week 14, coming out of week 13. With that being said, this Saturday, as you all know, Tallahassee, Florida, Bragg Memorial Stadium, you had the number 1 ranked Florida A&M Rattlers that improved 11-1, 8-0 in conference play as they defeated number 4 Prairie Panthers that failed to 6-6 on the season, 6-2 in the conference race, 35-14. The game got in within 7 points, 21-14 with that matchup, which I thought was interesting. For me, the big play after coming out of that was the MVP 23 as he came out and had a 20-yard run. That was kind of the turning point where I said, ooh, and they scored on that drive, took it to 28-14, and basically they were able to close it out from there. But with you, if you would, Charles, give us your analysis of that matchup besides the rain, because I heard somebody say it after coming back and getting dry and getting ready for the Celebration Bowl, which dampened things a little bit, but not very much. People were out there in the rain suits, stayed around. They certainly were there for the celebration when it all went down. But besides that, what were your thoughts in terms of the actual game itself?
Well, I do want to send kudos to FAMU's fan base for the way they turned out in the rain. I mean, we did have stoppages and whatnot, but they were there in full force, and you took notice of it. It was something that jumped out at me with regards to FAMU's love for this football team, and they stayed through the rain thick and thin. So give credit to them. When I take a look at this game, the biggest thing for me was I did not think Prairie View could play from behind. I think that was the big thing that really jumped out for me. And I said going into this game that time of possession was going to be my key stat. And that being said, the more inclement the weather, I thought that bode well for Prairie View because it meant that you were going to have to hunker down and try to stop the run. And I thought, once Prairie View got down early, that early turnover sort of set the stage for the game because, 3-4 plays later, FAMU was right down in the red zone or the strike zone, as they like to call it. And it was an easy touchdown off the interception. And from there, it was kind of a boat race to me. I mean, I just thought that Prairie View was going to have to control the clock with the running game, and I knew they had the ability to do that. But you take your hat off to FAMU's defense. They did not let Prairie View's running game get up and going. I thought, it forced Prairie View into some situations where you knew they had to pass the ball, and I think that played into FAMU's hands.
Yeah, to your point, FAMU jumps out 14-0 after the first quarter. Both scored 7, so you went in the half 21-7. Coming out of the half, Prairie View was the first to score. And that's where I was saying that it got to 21-14. But that was after intriguing 4th and 2 play call by Coach Simmons that went for it. Prairie View, to their credit, got the stop and set themselves in really good field position around the 40-some yard line, had a big breakout run. And the second play of that drive that went 30-some yards for a touchdown to get it 21-14 in terms of that matchup. FAMU answered with 14 points, 7 in the third, 7 in the fourth. And as you know, that was the final score, 35-14. So you're right. I thought it was interesting as FAMU was able to jump out early. Also, I thought Prairie View coming out, deciding to throw to see if they can open up the running game, I imagine. And sometimes I think maybe you can, think about things too much to some degree. But especially the throw on the first 3 passes, I thought that was intriguing with the weather and all that involved. And then FAMU, not to be outdone, they throw like their first 3 passes. I was like, all right, I don't get it. What's going on here? But obviously, that's what happens in the football games in a lot of matchups. Kudos when we throw out some of these stats, and I'll get your thoughts on this before we take our next break. Jeremy Musa was 32 of 22 for 188 yards. Trayvon Conley was 17 of 14 for 91 yards. You probably wouldn't say that was bad. Obviously, the interception was tough, but he was concussed, is my understanding. He had to go out the game. Prairie really didn't have a backup. They went with Kenneth Patterson. Couldn't get much there. But they were Chris Heron, which probably throws some people off because people will say, that's a wide receiver. Yes. Yeah. That would end up being the backup. So they went to running Wildcat, Panther Cat, something, whatever you want to do with and not doing it with even a running back with a wide receiver. So that was interesting to see. But I thought he did what he could. I mean, he was 0 for 3 in the passes. Obviously, that is not going to get it. Did have 1 interception. But he was 7 of 70 rushing the ball, trying to throw up. Caleb Johnson had 10 carries, 56 yards in terms of 1 touchdown, as well as Ahmad Antoine was 6 of 52 for 35 yards. So they did put up 183 rushing. So that in itself was good. But you probably need to get up 200 plus to really put yourself in the game. 2 touchdowns to make it more interesting in that. Receiving, they only were able to put up total of 91 yards, which you would hope the running would allow you to throw up top and maybe open up the game a little bit. Trajan Spiller had 3 catches for 27 yards, just 27 yards. Samar Savage, that we've seen, had some breakout games, only had 22 yards on 1 reception. But again, part of that in the second half is the fact that you were not traditionally doing what you want. Brian Jenkins Jr. Did have 1 catch for 10 yards, but even when he is limited on his catches, oftentimes he'll have 2 or 3, and he have 1 that's really big. He didn't get that 1 big reception in terms of getting things going in terms of what that looks like. But on the winning side of things, getting back to that, FAMU was able to rush for 229 yards. I know that'll be topic over the next 2 weeks. Can they continue to rush the ball? We saw that breakout game in terms of Terrell Jennings as he was able to get it done in the Florida Classic. Obviously, in this game, 17 carries for 113 yards, big yards, 2 touchdowns, or long of 33. But you had some other guys that continue to rush the ball as they have a group of stable running backs. Next biggest carry was LaLon Witt, had 8 carries for 57 yards. But Marcus Riley got in the mix a little bit, 2 for 28. Jacques Yant, 4 for 16. And he was able to get in the end zone, just to name some of the running backs in terms of what they were able to do in terms of that matchup. So fascinating there. They balanced 229 in terms of rushing and 219 in the air. That's pretty good, putting up over 400 yards. Yeah. Marcus Riley had a big game, 132 yards, 5 receptions and a touchdown. And then the other ones do what they do for FAMU as they get in the mix, mixing it up with different receivers. So now that I kind of throw some of the stats out there, any guys beside those that were the MVP of the matchups that stood out with you, or they want to shut out the MVP in itself?
Marcus Riley. Marcus Riley has been a game-changing type receiver all season. I haven't seen him covered at all this past season. Huge kickoff return against Jackson State, but he's just one of those breakout guys, and you saw it early in this game, little play action, and he got behind the safety early in that game for a big catch, and it set the tone of the game. The stat that I did circle for FAMU was that rushing attack. When you talk about Terrell Jennings with 113 yards, I think coming into the game, he was a leading rusher for FAM, but he didn't even have 500 yards rushing on the season. So it was one of those things where I felt as though if Prairie View could stop FAMU running the football and force them into being one-dimensional, and they could come after Jeremy Musa, I thought it bode well for him. But to FAM's credit, they found a running game in the SWAC championship game, and Terrell Jennings had a really breakout performance when you're talking about what he was able to get done. 6.6 yards per carry, had a big run, 33-yard run. So it was a very balanced, very efficient sort of football game for FAM, and you just take your hats off. I thought they did a tremendous job, even defensively, not allowing Trezon to run the football. He only ran for 5 attempts, 5 yards, something to that effect. And I thought that was a big part of Prairie View's offense when you talk about the read option, just his threat to run the football. And the defensive ends for FAMU, they were up for the challenge. They did a great job in terms of not allowing that to be a component of Prairie View's offense.
Good stuff there. As we kind of put a pin on 2023 from a SWAC perspective, obviously we'll come back and look at this from a HBCU perspective in a couple of weeks. But what were your biggest surprises this year in the SWAC football season?
Biggest surprises, I think
it could be a player or a team.
Yeah, I think a huge surprise for me was Southern. I thought this would be a season where you would see that Dooley offense sort of take off. And I felt pretty good about them coming out of SWAC Media Day in terms of, keeping an eye on them. But things never really, somehow it never meshed with regards to Coach Dooley and Southern. And at the time of the hire, I thought it was a match made in heaven. And now we're moving on to another coach with regards to Southern. I thought the roster churn that Jackson State had, for them to have a 7-4 season, I thought that spoke volumes in terms of what TC was able to get done. Now, he gets an opportunity to kind of put more of his stamp on the program with a recruiting class. So those were a couple of things that stood out. Guys like he didn't get the SWAC Defensive Player of the Year, but a guy like Colton Bubba Adams, all over the place. I mean, a real tackling machine when you talk about him and Dozier up at UAPB. Some games that stood out for me, definitely Texas Southern's upset over Alcorn. That was huge. Not to be outdone, UAPB's upset of Texas Southern. That last regular season game where they came back big. That was a big time game. But, again, it was another year full of excitement in the SWAC. Record turnout, Bayou Classic, coaching turnover. The SWAC never disappoints in that regard.
Good stuff. I like that. I'd say Team Prairie View being able to reach the mountaintop in terms of winning the West. I thought they would finish better than where they were expected, but not that high. So shout out to Trayvon Connolly, defensive players, running back Antoine. They got in the mix, got it done in a lot of ways. Shout out to them. The defense for being solid, particularly in terms of the matchup where they went in and got it done against Alabama State and Southern. I thought those were big games, big matchups, games that stood out in terms of Prairie View. Shout out to Aaron Allen for the Braves in terms of his comeback season, not even starting the season in the starting lineup, but put himself right in there in terms of player of the year, was in that mix at least in a lot of ways, and brought the Braves right onto the edge of playing for a championship. Other than, as you said, Texas Southern kind of biting them was a big one. I thought that was fascinating. Obviously, you got to say shout out for FAMU, Coach Willie Simmons.
Yeah.
To be in the league dog, you've experienced this the last 2 years, Jackson State coming out there. To play at that level week after week when you're getting a lot of teams better because you were predicted, to be able to carry that through, I think that's a shout out to look at Alabama A&M. A little disappointed in the Alabama Bulldogs in terms of them being able to take that next step. But with that being said, I'll stay in the state of Alabama. Alabama State, the Hornets, taking that next leap in terms of looking like they're turning that program around, particularly after getting a big win to start it off, but then getting a tough loss to Miles.
Yeah.
A lot of folks having questions with quarterback going through that and allowing the defense to lead it, but doing enough offensively to put themselves in the mix, essentially finishing second in the SWAC East, along with getting that big road homecoming win against Jackson State. As you said, there was a formidable team, finished 7-4. Are you talking about a team, Jackson State, with that type of victory? They're fighting in that last game against the Braves to see about seriously looking at getting a bid to the playoffs themselves, letting you know just how little it is. The last thing, I'll put it on there, I'm sure you'll appreciate this, is the West taking the next step overall, at least, to get a little closer to the East. You had 9 wins. And again, all these games were not conference games, so you get a little over than the amount of total conference games. But you had 9 wins of the West to 11 wins in the East. And as you know, year before that, it was about 67% of what the East was winning at a clip. And now you almost get it at 50%, just under that. So I thought that was a major statement in this year to see the West taking a different step. And this is with the West being very talented in terms of how close the West was. But it wasn't definitely because of mediocre. It was about them taking the next step. So I thought that was a big thing. With that, we'll take our next break, come back on the other side. Great comments by Charles getting you inside as we close out the SWAC championship game as well as the SWAC regular season as we get into that Celebration Bowl in the MEAC. Come back on the other side. We'll give you our poll rankings. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
This is Ryan Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Lab. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Lab, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
When it comes to professional learning, teachers deserve better. From the leader in online learning, Stride brings you the Stride Professional Development Center, an on-demand library of mobile-friendly courses that gives teachers choice and flexibility, allowing them to learn anytime and anywhere. Our dynamic courses provide bite-sized learning and help educators advance their knowledge while also gaining professional development hours. It's time you take charge of your learning. Visit us today to get started.
Compress the analytic data with your hip-hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a lot, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil's inside the HBCU Sports Lab as we're kind of doing a wrap-up, semi-wrap-up, officially as we start to close out the year. We're going to give you that, obviously, when we get into the New Year's week show where we really take a deeper dive. But as we're doing this, we're going to do it as we do our finishing touch on the SWAC, as we gave you what took place in the SWAC Championship Game in Tallahassee and the downfall. Ooh, you talking about a hurricane game. We got our own in the SWAC for the SWAC Championship Game. Lightning days and everything. With that being said, we're going to talk about a mid-major poll rankings week number 7. It's frozen again. We want to show you, just keep it in front of your mind. And I have a couple of questions I want to ask Charles about the mid-major division. We're going to look at it mostly from the CIAA and SIAC, as some of our NIA programs like Langston and Florida Memorial had solid seasons, but not quite, at least for Langston, where we used to seeing them over the past couple of years. In Florida Memorial, to their credit, they were in a conference championship race, so they certainly took the next step. So a team to watch as we move forward. But with that being said, let's get into our poll rankings as we look at the receiving votes. Allen Yellow Jackets, 7-3, 5-3, probably one of the biggest stories of the year. Albany State Golden Rams, 6-5, 6-2, as well as Fort Valley State Wildcats is 7-3, 6-2. Fort Valley State still has a game to play, so they get 11 on the books. We'll see what that looks like and see can they find their way around these things in terms of moving into the top 10 as they are ranked. With that being said, as we look at the top 7, as we know, sitting at the top is Benedict Tigers. As they fall in the playoffs 11-1, as well as Virginia Union Panthers 10-2. They have all 9 first-place votes remaining in that number 1 position in terms of what that looks like. Fascinating to see all the way. So you see, even during the breaks, you see Tuskegee, Fort Valley kind of fluctuating back and forth as they were just in the 7. I'm sure they'll get a chance to make that final 7 as they float up, probably 7 before that game starts. But with that being said, Charles, this is the question I have for you. Obviously, when we look at these matchups, CIAA, SIAC, CIAA over the last couple of years, in a lot of ways, was really top-heavy, particularly when you look at the North Division in terms of what they got done. You had some talent, but maybe not as deep in the SIAC. I think that may have flipped this year. Yeah. Obviously, it came down to the last week, not because you were looking who's going to win necessarily the SIAC, as Benedict pretty much locked that up. There's questions of whether they would be 1 or 2 going into the championship game as they played Allen for that rivalry game. They had a chance to change up some things there. But in terms of who was going to finish second, it was 4 or 5 deep, and a lot of that played out. Those matchups with Miles and Tuskegee, Fort Valley and Albany State for those rivalry games, if you would. But the question I have for you, CIAA, SIAC, are you still looking at CIAA being the king of the crown, or do you hold now to the SIAC? Where are you going with this?
Well, obviously, Benedict was a different monster, undefeated back-to-back seasons. But if we put the poll up and you take a look at, like you said, Benedict's 1, but then you have 4 CIAA teams sitting right there before you get back to Miles and Tuskegee, and then those who were just out of that top 7. So I think it's a lot more balanced now. I mean, you got good teams there in the CIAA North, good teams in the CIAA South when you talk about Fayetteville State. But that is a tough question in terms of, the power dynamic within the mid-majors and the Division II schools. I would say slightly Benedict, because Benedict for the past 2 seasons was essentially what Bowie State was in the previous 2 seasons. Yeah. So, maybe the needle just slides just a little bit to the SIAC.
I like the way you're playing it safe, but I have no problem with it because you're correct. Because it's a challenge. Because while you have, let's pull up that top 7 if we can. While you have 6, if you look at the top 10 in terms of those receiving votes, you have 6 of the teams out of the SIAC in the total top 10, including those receiving votes. But as you see in this top 7, you have 4, if you would, in terms of CIAA. But 4 of those top things are right there in the top 5. Yeah. 4 of the top 5 is the CIAA. So the depth in some ways probably goes to the SIAC, but maybe the top in terms of the teams goes to CIAA. Is that because of the depth of one conference versus the other?
Yeah.
Or those kind of questions. So to your point, while I was teasing you and saying that it's close, I think you're absolutely right when you look at it this year. That it may slide in one direction, but the depth, when you talk about that in terms of the quality of these two conferences, says a lot in terms of where they are. Which brings us to this. Obviously, we have the postseason matchup that's facing CIAA, SIAC. And again, we'll get a chance to maybe tease that a little more with Fort Valley State and Johnson C. Smith to see where that's going. I know the SIAC folks out there say that SIAC is going to get it done, in particular some of the HBCU guru football two guys out there as they get onto it. But I don't know more if that's just a little bit of that SIAC fandom that's out there, if you would, or what is it? But the other thing that is looking at is that CIAA, SIAC to open up the season. Remember, that was denied last year. It's my understanding that they're pushing for it again. So it'll be fascinating to see what that looks like. Or maybe if we can get a couple of more of these big matchups, Fayetteville State against Albany State, right? And in terms of those key matchups, it'll be fascinating to see. Miles Golden Bears against a Virginia Union.
That would be
fascinating,
cool.
Right? Johnson C. Smith against a Tuskegee would be some interesting matchups. Virginia State matching up against a Fort Valley State in some of these key matchups.
Give me Allen versus somebody. I want to see Allen versus somebody. Yeah, that'd be some good stuff. Yeah,
maybe it's Allen versus Johnson C. Smith.
Yeah,
South Carolina, North Carolina.
North Carolina. I like that.
Yeah, but wanted to give some love to the mid majors. Obviously, they're not going to be in the forefront in a couple of weeks, but closed out and had a tremendous season. A lot of good football. Fascinating to see what they're going to do off season. Obviously, you talk about Morehouse going to make a hire. You've seen Keene coming over from Allen to Clark Atlanta, which is a huge shakeup in terms of Clark Atlanta looking to make that next step. We hear some rumblings out there in terms of expansion from the MEAC. Some Division II, maybe taking that leap to Division I. We'll see if that's going to take place in terms of that. Are we going to get some expansion in the SWAC? Is that going to happen again this offseason? So a lot to keep our eyes on, a lot of focus out there. So I'm interested. We still have the coaching searches at the major division level. We still have it open for Morehouse. It'll be fascinating to see how these things close out. With that being said, before we too far off in it, let's take our next break and come back on the other side and start touching on a little bit of the magic for the Celebration Bowl and get some way too early thoughts on that matchup from Charles Bishop. Stick with me right back after this break.
Since 2002, Empowerment Resources, Inc., a nonprofit organization, has empowered more than 1,500 youth and adults in Duval and surrounding counties through its programs Journey into Womanhood, Girls Mentoring, Life Skills for Teens, and Parenting Education Coaching. To get involved with programs, volunteer, or donate, visit www.empowermentresourcesinc.org. Follow us on social media, facebook.com/empowerment.resources and instagram.com/empowermentjax.
Compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a lot, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Ville with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Let's get in our major division rankings for week number 14. No real changes this week. Everything settles down, but obviously we have some updates in terms of the record, so let's see how it falls out. A major contest will be Celebration Bowl, and we'll see what that looks like. In the teams just outside of the top 7, completing the top 10, is at number 8, essentially receiving votes. The Southern Jaguars 6-5, 5-3, as they got the big win in the Bayou Classic to get it done. Fourth down stop allows them to win and close it out. Tennessee State Tigers 6-5, 2-4. A good season overall, but a tough way to end it. We'll see what that means as they move forward. Obviously not doing as well as they would like in the OVC as they finished 2-4. But overall season, you got to give them credit. They got the winning record, which always shows progress and growth. Grambling State, we saw a coaching change there after they fall just out of a winning record with a 5-6, 4-4 in conference play, 147 points. So they're outside in the top 10. With that being said, let's get into the top 7. Top 7 rankings as we have is number 7 is Jackson State Tigers, 7-4, 5-3. Charles told you what they look like in terms of the totality of the season, taking the next step. So it's really going to be fascinating to see what they do in the off season. Can they take that next step? And now they become the hunter versus the huntee in a lot of ways, chasing FAMU. People would say maybe even Alabama State, which brings us to number 6. Those Alabama State Hornets are 6-4, 5-3, 180 points. They stay at the 6th mark. Finish the season with a winning record. Actually close out at 7-4 as they got the big win against Tuskegee. Finish up the season 7-4 overall. Big time play by them. At number 5, Alcorn State Braves finished at 7-4, 6-2, 191 points, finishing 5. This is going to be interesting. You're talking about a top 5 program. Not back to even a big winner ways, but just failed literally a couple of seconds short of playing for a conference championship, 7-4. So excited in a lot of ways, overall record, but disappointing in terms of tying with the Western Division at 6-2. With that being said, and then now you're hearing some rumblings about the coach. Will he continue to be there, or will he take his talents somewhere else, namely possibly in the SWAC, maybe even stay in the West? So that could be fascinating if that takes place. Bring us to number 4. Prairie A&M Panthers at 6-6, 6-2. Finished the overall season at 500. Not very good in terms of non-conference. Some of them were good competition in terms of stepping up FBS, including SMU, that actually won their conference, as we see them win their championship game this past weekend. So it gives you some indication, but did play for a championship, 192 point finishing 4 in this week's ranking. Bringing us to number 3, North Carolina Central. It's hard to say that a 93 season is a disappointment.
Yeah.
4-1. That's when you know the expectations are really high.
Yeah.
240 points, staying at number 3, fascinating. Had that loss on the road to Howard, as Howard rebounded and got a little payback from last year. As they took 50 points, this year they give 50 points. Central did that, played in the playoffs. They did get the bid, led in the first half against Richmond, and then it literally falls apart as you see quarterback Richard hit, slightly injured. He was able to play the rest of the game. Be interesting to see where North Carolina Central's going. They lose everything. Quarterback, All-American Player of the Year out of the MEAC, as we announced early in the show. So it's fascinating to see where that program is. Are they at the point where they rebuild or reload? We'll get to see in the offseason and certainly next year. Bringing us to number 2, Howard Bison, 6-5, 4-1. You talk about having that magical campaign. They're in the Celebration Bowl. They get it done. They go to 7-5, defeat number 1 rankings. They're going to put their mark in their statement on saying that they should be number 1 and the HBCU national champion if they take down essentially number 1 and number 3 at the last 3 weeks of the season. So it's fascinating as they have a lot to be able to say, even though the record is just at 6-5, which may not excite everybody, but it lets you know just how big it is when you're playing for a championship. And then you have the Florida A&M Rattlers. They sit at 11-1, 8-0. First time in many years that they got to 11 wins. They finally got the conference championship, and this one is the first of its kind because it's in the SWAC. 12 first place votes, 252 points. They're back where they believe they belong in terms of the top of the mountain for HBCU sports. And they're looking at a national champion they can get it done against Howard, they can really do it in fine fashion because they'll have 12 wins, only one loss. That one loss would be against the FBS program. It's going to be fascinating to see what this looks like, but that'll do it for our top 7 in week number 14. Charles, what are your thoughts?
Perfect on cue in terms of the top 7. I think that's right. What I keep looking at is the offseason for every one of these teams. Every one of these teams are going to have a lot of question marks, a lot of things that they're going to have to answer in the offseason. When you're talking about Jackson State, they got to rebuild a defensive line. You're talking about Alabama State, Keyshawn Johnson's in the portal. So who becomes a new playmaker? Can the Alabama State find a consistency at the quarterback position? Alcorn State, they will. We'll see, what their roster turn will be like. Prairie will be breaking in a new quarterback. North Carolina Central breaking in a new quarterback. Howard's going to have some roster turn. These are and what's very interesting is the Celebration Bowl teams are veteran teams. So those are things that you kind of keep in mind. So there isn't the continuity of the roster as you've seen, I think, for the past 2 years, especially taking a look back at Jackson State because you had Shadua coming back, for another season. So there was that quarterback to look forward to going into the 2022 season. So who is that quarterback to look forward going into the 2023-24 season? Is it Aaron Allen who, takes that next step, if you will, for Alcorn? So a lot of question marks to be handled in the offseason.
Man, that's a tremendous point you make. Looking at this top 7, I just realized all of them, except for maybe Alabama State Hornets, can have a new quarterback under center next year. Yeah. So that's going to be fascinating. Not only do you have your natural turnover of senior of these loaded teams, particularly between FAMU, Howard, North Carolina, Central, even Prairie View, which is fascinating, even with the Alcorn State Braves, with these teams fighting, tooth and nail for a championship, whether it's conference or national, they were right on the edge. A lot of these teams are loaded with senior leadership to get it done, which means you're finna have that turnover naturally with that. But then you have the transfer portal.
Right.
So if you were having some folks that you were counting on to take the next step, can you count on them in terms of them returning?
Can you retain them?
You're going to have a chance to go out and maybe get some gold. You're going to mine some gold out there. Who's going to be the one that strikes the gold? As I had a chance to talk to Jermaine Jackson. He's the head football coach, Texas Southern alum, as he looks to see what he can get done in terms of taking some coaching opportunities. He went to the quarterfinals of Augusta, a tough loss for them in regards to in the rain. They got it done. That was the same team that obviously defeated Benedict College when you talk about that. But now you have these new coaches that are transferring and looking to get into the mix too. With Chennis Berry, is he going to be the next taking over? His name has been mixed for all 3 of the big time jobs out there with South Carolina State, Southern, and Texas Southern. With South Carolina State even putting an offer on the table. So will he be in the MEAC or will he be in the SWAC, or will he stay in the SIAC? So it'll be fascinating to see what that looks like. We talked about the movement within conference. Are you going to see that kind of changeover rolling? So it will be fascinating the season next year with a lot of question marks. We can wait till July to really get into it and get that excited. But we get a chance in the spring to kind of see what takes place over the next couple of weeks. We'll at least see who some head coaches. We'll see those teams coming in the portal, who stays in the portal, where do they go, who maybe comes back out of the portal, and who do you get in the portal. So it's going to be fascinating. Then in February, you get to sign today some early glimpses of who you get excited about, especially if they're JUCOs. So those guys you expect to start right away. You're going to some freshmen that you can lather up and get excited about. Ooh-wee. I just can't believe it. It'll be fascinating to see what that looks like. I do want to ask you this because I want to talk a little bit of basketball and get your thoughts on that. But before I do that, would be remiss if I didn't give you a chance to talk maybe a little more about this matchup in the cricket celebration bowl. Howard, as we see now, ranked number 2, comes in at 6-5, 4-1, representing the MEAC. Played a very tough non-conference schedule. Ran through the MEAC, but they were not unscathed. They do have their loss when they went to South Carolina State on the road. So they have that blemish. So even within the conference, they were not able to do what FAMU did, which is go 8-0 and win a championship game, the added game that you have to get through in the SWAC. 11-1. People have their thoughts on this. In Atlanta, a lot of fans will be there. You expect that you'll have a near sellout crowd, if not sellout crowd. My understanding, tickets are brisk. As you see there, in terms of the bus going to Atlanta, nobody in the driver's seat anymore. They're there. They've landed those tickets. So nobody in the hunt. It's going to be between Howard and Florida A&M, a magical matchup for the Cricket Celebration Bowl. Charles, what are your early thoughts? Certainly don't have lean any direction in terms of who you're picking, but just give me some thoughts that people are going to start digging, getting excited about this matchup, whether it's players to watch, coaches to think what direction they're going to go in.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Yeah, I think, as always, the MEAC brings that healthy chip on their shoulder into the Celebration Bowl. Without fail, we know we're going to hear next week, how although the MEAC has had success, they consistently talk about how everybody always talks about the offense in the SWAC and the eyeballs are in the SWAC and the fun and the excitement is in the SWAC. So, they although they've had tremendous success in the Celebration Bowl, somehow Howard's going to find a way to make themselves that super underdog, much the way South Carolina State did, North Carolina Central, Jackson State gets all the pressure. It's going to happen next week. So I know this is going to happen. But, the thing for me is when you take a look at Howard, the first, data point for me is, can Howard pop FAMU in the nose the way they did North Carolina Central? Because if you go back to that game, it was big plays, that Howard was able to hit against North Carolina Central. And then you were able to kind of rely on Eaton James and Jared Hunter and those guys. So that's something that jumps out to me in that regards. But, without fail, they're going to come in with that great big old chip on their shoulder, and they're going against the number one defense in the nation when you're talking about Florida A&M's defense. So a fascinating matchup.
Ooh, good stuff. Good early tease, Charles. Well done. Well done. Let me give a shout out, Coach Willie Simmons. The honors keep coming. Last week we talked about him being the SWAC Coach of the Year, where he was notched by FCS CFP Light on Sports Coach of the Year. I like this as we started talking about the transfer portal and we talked about the freshmen coming out of high school. You also have Light on Sports Fall 2023 Assistant Coaches of the Year, which included Recruiter of the Year, Jevin Reeves, which is fascinating in terms, obviously, what he was able to do for their program. And ultimately, if you want to use this as a measuring block, winning a conference championship certainly says a lot and is a feather in your cap, if nothing else. Before that being said, next Thursday, we'll talk a little bit about the proposal, new changes in the NCAA as an athletic subdivision rooting in the direction of athlete compensation. That's going to be huge, how that factors in, and we'll have to get a deeper dive and talk about some business. We'll do that in an early segment on Thursday. But I know you wanted to put some final shout-outs and plugs for basketball, namely starting with Arkansas Pine Bluff, the ladies basketball, defeating SMU 78-76. Don has it going on over there and really playing big in terms of that matchup. I saw some Prairie folks were teasing. This is a battle of former Prairie A&M women's basketball coaches. And both of them had won SWAC tournament championships. So these are championship coaches, so don't forget that. So fascinating to see Toya Wilson getting it done in terms of that. What are your thoughts in terms of that matchup between Arkansas Pine Bluff and SMU?
Zay Green back healthy. She had a big game last night. It's going to be fun to watch Arkansas Pine Bluff sort of see where they go, because they were right there in the mix there in the SWAC tournament last year, but they didn't have a healthy Zay Green in that tournament. So it'll be interesting to see what she brings to this Arkansas Pine Bluff mix on the women's side of the ball. Great wins thus far. Jackson State on the road. Southern, a huge one against number 21 Mississippi State. Shout out to the Jags on that. Anytime you get a win on Mississippi State, way to go. So definitely, you've got some some big wins thus far on the season. And, you know, I don't know, and I have to take a look at some more games, but one stat that's kind of jumping out at me is these HBCU teams, they're rebounding well with these Power 5 teams thus far. I think Jackson State in their upset, they out-rebounded the team they played. So I wanted to kind of browse the stats with regards to Southern Mississippi State to see if there were some trend lines that we are starting to see because we're, you know, through the transfer portal, we're getting, you know, some real athletes, especially out on the wings now. So that's really something that I'm kind of paying attention to.
Yeah, I was going to shout out and want to get into some on the men's and some of those big upsets, Southern over Mississippi State there. I know you were going to say there were some angels singing in terms of that win, but I did want to leave out the women. I got another one for you I think that you'll appreciate. CollegeInsider.com. Women's mid-major top 25. We have two major division programs on the women's side in the top 25. Check this out, Charles. At number 20, you have Norfolk State, the Spartans. Ladies get it done. The time at the ranking, they were 7-2. Well, guess who's right behind them? The second team in the poll, number 22, Jackson State. The ladies are getting it done over there as well, as they are 4-2. MEAC and SWAC. You talking about a MEAC SWAC challenge? Norfolk State ladies. Spartans. That would be a fun. Jackson State. Yeah. That'd be a little fun. But right now, we can enjoy them to continue to do what they do and see if they can continue to rise in the College Insider basketball women's .com poll rankings in top 25. That's a kudos. That's a major shout out. We've seen some teams singly being in the top 25, but getting you two, and then you get one out of the MEAC, one out of SWAC. Yeah, that's pretty good there in terms of what that looks like. So excited about that. I wanted to make sure we got in the table. So I'll ask your final thoughts on that because I think you really did a great job in terms of shout out on the men's side. The thing that I'll say about the men's before I let you have the final word with the women's in their top 25 is the fact that we got teams already with 3-4 Division I wins. Yeah. Prairie was the first one to get the 3, but you also now have Norfolk State, Howard with 4 Division I wins, Tennessee State sneaking in there with their 4 wins at the Division I level. So on the men's side, you also have that taking place, that not only are they getting some of these major Power 5 upsets we've seen, but they're also getting some solid D1, mid-major, and low-major wins, particularly with, as you know, a lot of these games are in neutral sites on the road. So get that done. That's a shout-out. So a lot of shout-out there in terms of what that looks like. So I did want to say that before, again, I give you that final word, the shout-out there. Obviously, SWAC is 2-2 overall against HBCU programs. So officially, the MEAC is 4-0 against HBCU Division I competition and 2-0 against the SWAC. The SWAC is 2-2 overall in HBCU Division I competition, 0-2 against the MEAC, obviously. That's big when you talk about non-conference HBCUs getting those wins to be at that level. The MEAC is 1-0 against HBCU Division I. They hadn't played a SWAC, but they will play one SWAC matchup, so I'm interested to see what that looks like a little later on. We do have a couple of matchups coming up with Bethune-Cookman against South Carolina State. You have South Carolina State in another matchup, I believe, against the SWAC team. We'll give you that information as we get closer over the next couple of weeks to keep your eyes on what that looks like. I always try to find ways to dig in here and see some of these HBCU data points to see what that looks like beside just the overall wins. And what we can expect is it's going to be a barn burner. It looks like on the men's and women's side for both the MEAC and the SWAC. With that being said, Charles, final words in terms of top 25 college insiders for the women. Any other thoughts you might have to close out the show today? Yeah, huge recognition thus far for Norfolk State and Jackson State. I think you're seeing some great basketball being played on both the men's and women's side, especially on the women's side. And when you start looking at some of these women's games, they match up very well with some of these teams that they're playing. And they're not just showing up for the check and moving on to the next city. They're coming to win and get the check. So that's real important to keep in mind. The mindset, especially that these coaches are implementing into these athletes. They're going out there and performing. I love it. Another shout out for those ice cold brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Happy Founders Day, belated late as it was yesterday, December 4th, that magic day. 117 years as we celebrated coming down. We're looking forward to 118. That being said, thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with colleagues and friends. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Watts, Charles Bishop. Make sure you continue to check us up. Again, check us out and check up on us. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Shout out to all the lab listeners out there. Appreciate you joining us, showing us love. Great comments. Keep them coming. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watts and Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time, Sunday at 9. We'll see if we're going to do a show this week. We might wait until the final week to get in there, but we'll find out and see if you all push us. We'll make sure we get it to you. Look forward to Thursday as we give you the latest in the lab. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, DrKenyatta on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Facebook and Inside the HBCU Sports Lab on YouTube. On Thursday, you will have your media day officially breaking out the coaches. Howard University coach Larry Scott. And then you have for FAMU head coach Willie Simmons. Should be fascinating in Atlanta as they open up things on Thursday. With that being said, dream big, continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Charles?
Of course.
Roy?
Lecture.
Dismiss. Congratulations, Roy. I like that.
06.